It is incredibly daunting trying to learn every single character in Marvel Rivals. With so many heroes to choose from, trying to pick which one and learn any of them can take a long time. But in this video, we're going to go over one tip for every single hero so you can get just that much better at any hero you want to play. Now, we're committed to making you the best Rivals player you could possibly be, and we're going to pump out a ton more guides on this channel. So definitely smash that subscribe button so you don't miss a single one, and let me know down below if there's any heroes that you want a deep dive advanced guide on, and I'll get right on it. Now, first off, we got to talk about Star-Lord. And I know that Star-Lord's ultimate seems incredibly flashy and powerful, and you want to start a fight off just popping your ultimate. But oftentimes, when there are too many players, not only are you just going to get shot and potentially killed, but you're not going to be able to clean anyone up. It's hard for your ultimate to burst through a lot of different healing and tank health plus mitigation abilities. I would highly recommend using this in the mid-fight after you've already achieved some amount of advantage. Let's say you get one pick, let's pop this ultimate and snowball it into more and more picks. Let's use it to snowball a fight or close out a fight, not as the front end to a fight, because we could get killed and shut down really easily. Now, Hela, on the other hand, is a super strong DPS, but her Soul Drainer is the primary tool she has to counter dive. This means that if the enemy is playing a dive composition with characters that want to jump on you, you want to save your Soul Drainer and also your movement ability so that you can get away from these players, constantly wrapping around the map away from them and saving these abilities so that you can shut down a potential dive, giving you some counterplay. Now, if you're up against characters that don't want to dive you, you can actually use your abilities more liberally. Take alternate angles with your mobility, use your Soul Drainer to actually stun a tank on the front line, dink him in the head and have your team follow up. There's a lot of ways to use these abilities more proactively if you're not going to need to use them reactively. Now, Namor's turrets are deceptively sniper turrets. They have an effective range of 40 meters, which is further than most characters' primary effective range. For example, Hela's range damage starts falling off at 18 meters plus, and these turrets are effective from 40 meters. Absolutely insane. You can position them in very far back places with line of sights to lots of angles and areas to deny flankers, still hurt the front line, and be hard for enemies to deal with because it's so much further than they would expect, and maybe they can even deal damage to. Now, Loki has a crazy ultimate. You can copy any character in the game and you get their ultimate right away, but not every ultimate is created equal and not every copy is created equal. For instance, if you copy the Hulk, not only are you going to have to copy him and turn into Bruce Banner, but you have to turn into the Hulk, then you have to ult again before you can actually use the ultimate in the first place. You're wasting a lot of time and you're telegraphing it immensely, and enemies know that they just need to run away from you until the ultimate runs out. So in general, I want you to think about a couple of things. Number one, what that ultimate is going to be able to immediately do. And I want you to think of like worst case scenario here. Don't think, oh, I'm going to copy Ironman ult and kill 5 people. Be realistic about what your ultimate can do. And also think about what abilities can you use to get immediate value. This applies to Loki, but basically for every ultimate, we're not trying to only go for the highest upside play with ultimates every single time. We are trying to minimize the worst case scenario with ultimates where we do nothing, get no value, or maybe even die. Also, don't forget you can copy your teammates, which might seem obvious, but I didn't know this at all. Now, Magik really wants to follow up tank aggression or DPS engagement. While there are certain characters that you can 1v1, oftentimes combining your aggression is going to allow you to burst them down much quicker and utilize the fact that Magik is more of an evasive diver than a high damage diver compared to some of the other options. Also, in general, Magik is extremely strong with Black Panther or Psylocke because of that synergy. She's going to get 15% more damage, which is going to allow her to burst targets a lot easier, and giving the recall ability to Psylocke or Panther might just make them meta tier. So yeah, I would say definitely find that duo and run it down. Now, Groot's wall is a super strong ability. It's very effective for isolating targets and generating area and space on the map, which is the places that you deal damage from, occupy, and heal from. And oftentimes, you're going to want to look for that choke point to wall enemies off. Just cutting an enemy off for a couple of seconds isn't a lot of value, but making it so the enemy tank is cut off from support or the enemy DPS diver can't run away, that's going to allow you to get that kill for free and is super, super strong. strong. Now, make sure that you're ready to drop your walls proactively though. Don't let enemies use them for cover or trap your teammates behind them. You need to make sure that your Black Panther has an out when he was expecting to go into the backline, kill someone, and run out the choke, but you walled it off. Just make sure you're paying attention to what your teammates are doing. Now, Rocket has two deployables that are super powerful if they are used correctly. For your BRB respawn, typically you're going to want to put this on a separate lane coming to sight, not too far away, because then it defeats the point, and not right next to where the bulk of your team is playing, especially if you can get your teammates to respawn on an alternate angle or coming in at an alternate angle from where your team is actually normally placed. This could be really powerful because it creates like a pincher, and it allows the people coming out of the teleporter and you holding a different angle with the rest of your team to control some of the flank angles on the BRB, which means that it's not going to get destroyed nearly as much. On top of that, when you pop your ultimate, I want you to make sure that you pop it before the fight has already actually established. Sometimes people will try to pop it too late and they'll try to turn a fight, but you really want your team to utilize its effectiveness for a longer time, being able to damage enemies and really whittle down the resources with extra damage. On top of that, use it behind a corner or a piece of cover so that the enemies can't just shoot it and break it. You want to make sure that you're peeking it, but the opponents cannot. Now, for Luna Snow, her ability to share the stage is super cool, but can be a bit confusing. So what it does is you can put it on one hero. Then if you heal another, the first hero is going to get a bit of that heals as well. Think of it like EXP share from Pokemon. This means that you can put it on a diver, someone that's harder to hit, and then heal your tank and heal up the diver as well, or the person taking it off angle. It's a brilliant ability. Now, for Black Panther, you gotta understand he's a very combo-oriented character that's about timing, allowing him to burst down tons of people very quickly and do a ton of damage, but you're really gonna want to wait for that right moment where enemies are distracted or overwhelmed to combine all your dashes and resets plus your ultimate together. You're not trying to be the star of attention, you're trying to wait until your teammates have aggro, they're going in, they're applying pressure, they're taking cooldowns before you strike. You gotta be just as patient and spend time doing nothing just as much as you're doing things on Black Panther. Now, Ironman allows you to fly forever, and you're going to want to position high and use the tops of buildings as your natural cover. Instead of going left and right around a ground cover, you're going up and down, jiggling up and down over the cover. And in general, you're not going to want to force beam positioning. I know beam does a lot of damage, but if you're that close to a target, you're probably in a poor position for Ironman. Use it as a tool to punish or when it perfectly aligns with your position naturally, but don't try to get in close to use it on an enemy. Also, you're typically trying to whittle down enemy resources on Iron Man and slowly whittle down all of their abilities, all their cooldowns, before positioning more aggressive and trying to make a more proactive play where you potentially kill somebody. Now, for Hulk, you need to learn the cycle of Hulk. Oftentimes, people will think that Hulk is weak because they don't do this cycle well. You need to dive in, create space and pressure, but you're not necessarily going for kills. You're, yes, going for attention and value in the form of baiting out cooldowns, but you need to know when to disengage. Oftentimes, you want to engage, use your cooldowns to generate that space and trade, and then you want to dive out, reset, wait for your cooldowns, get full healed before you go over again. Once you finally do generate that ultimate though, then you could go for a much larger play, but until then, you want to make sure that you're not committing too hard and you're cycling based off your specific cooldowns, and that's how you're going to have consistent value on Hulk without feeding and dying. Now, for Spider-Man, you have to turn off auto swing so that you can use horizontal dashes on the ground. It also allows you to get much more creative with how you're swinging around, and it just completely opened my eyes once I did it on Spider-Man. Now, I love Doctor Strange's portal, and there's a lot you can do with it. Number one, you can actually set up ult combos through it. Not only can you just jump through it if you put it above enemies where they're not looking, jump down and ult, really great. But you can also give your Iron Man a cheeky angle behind the enemies so that he can ult onto them. Or set up any number of ultimates that I think are really strong. Try to synergize this with a duo partner and you could do some crazy things. In addition to that, just simple abilities like getting Winter Soldier to pull someone through a TP and then shutting it, that's pretty cool as well. Now, for Magneto, you need to learn the push and pull of combat. If you're dying on Magneto, it's oftentimes because you're pushing when you should be pulling. And this is what I mean. Magneto has a lot of mitigation tools. He has his CC, his crowd control ability that will knock back enemies that he generates with bubbles. He has a bubble on himself or a teammate, and he has a shield. You typically want to push forward when you have all your abilities, generate value, damage, pressure, but then when enemies are putting pressure back and you're running out of abilities, you want to back up, you want to give space, you want to go behind cover, and this pull and push is the cycle that you need to do, because as long as you don't get punished, eventually you will win that attrition war on a character like Magneto. You want the fights to go long, you want the fights to be attrition-y, you do not want them to end instantly unless somehow you can get a kill. You want to back up when the enemy has an advantage and push forward when you do. Now, Mantis allows you to generate life orbs either really slowly over time or when you hit criticals. This means that you want to be mechanically good and dealing damage so that you can heal more and actually amplify your teammates' damage more, and it's a support that really wants to be mechanically proficient. Now, keep in mind, these headshots will trigger off of any character, including stuff like Loki's clones, but also tanks. So if you're just like spamming a tank so that you can heal your team back, that might be better than trying to like dink that Ironman, whiffing all your shots, and then not generating back your life orb. So sometimes going for those easier shots so that you can generate your life orb ability faster and more consistently, that might be the play. Now, Peni Parker is all about area denial. This means that unlike other tanks, she doesn't want to stand in the open space. She wants to hold the spaces around choke points, not in them. So this means that you might be dipping up the stairs slightly and setting up all your utility, or dipping inside slightly and giving your teammates a place where they can hold and deal damage or heal. And if enemies want to push them in there, they have to push through the Parker denied space. So you're holding adjacent space and applying pressure that way and baiting enemies to engage in your territory. You're not holding open space and potentially just getting farmed with nothing to really mitigate all the damage you're taking. Now, for Venom, the biggest mistake that players are making is they are engaging too fast. And that seems kind of weird. You're a character that can really go in, you can fly in, and you can slam on them. You want to do that, right? But you really want your team to be able to follow up on that. And the problem with Venom is that you're faster than a lot of players. And you don't just want your Spiderman to follow up on it. You want your Punisher. You want your Black Widow. You want your supports even to follow up on it if they can. This means that players need to have line of sight of the enemy before you're going in and slamming on them. This means that oftentimes you want to set up first, maybe kind of climb up, stay in a high ground, and just wait for your teammates to get line of sight of the enemy, slam the enemy when they're in line of sight of your team, so your team can follow up, and it's your job to engage that or make sure that timing lines up, because you're the one that is so much faster than everyone else, because you're the one that gets to set the terms of the engagement. Don't go too far ahead of your team. Wait for your team to be ready and just watch where they are, and then you can set this up perfectly every time. Now, for Adam Warlock, you don't want to go for a 5-man resurrect. This is super important, but maintaining the power level of both sides is often your best bet if you're trying to win a team fight. Going for a 5-man resurrect might actually make it so that your teammates are sitting ducks, not ready, and just killed again. That being said, the resurrect will resurrect on Adam Warlock himself, so you can actually resurrect your teammates slightly out of danger, and it's a good idea to do that if you can, but oftentimes trying to res 1, 2, or even 3 people is better than going for that 5-man resurrect and waiting for everyone to die, because still you want your team to have control of the map, outputting damage, and not just give up all the pressure entirely, because that's an easy way to lose 2 fights twice. Now, for Scarlet Witch, her ultimate is gonna require massive setup to get value with it. I know that it can wipe the entire enemy team, but most of the time you're gonna die or get nobody because they can just line of sight you. You need to make sure that you're playing natural cover until the last 2 seconds before popping out, or using it when the opponents are stuck between a rock and a hard place. Your team is using an ultimate, your team is kind of applying a lot of pressure, then you're popping out with the ultimate, so they have too much to deal with and they get overwhelmed, because if you just pop this randomly when they can just focus on you or avoid you, you're never gonna kill anybody with this ultimate. Now, for Storm, her weather control is going to shift between either damage or speed. And oftentimes, speed is going to be more impactful than damage in ways you might not think. defaulting to speed is good because it allows your teammates to get to the angles they want to get faster, allows you to move faster and you're harder to hit, and the exchange of damage is a bit more favorable. But if you're in a true situation where you're trying to fight someone actively and they're not paying attention to you, or if you're spamming at a choke and not really moving, then of course you can use that damage. But speed is generally going to be more impactful on average, and something that, even though you can't necessarily see the value always, it is getting value constantly. Now for the Punisher, his passive is going to allow you to see enemies after you D-peek for 3 seconds. This means you can throw your smoke in front of you and still see an enemy, but it also means that as you go around the corner, you can jiggle that corner, shoot, unjiggle, jiggle that corner, shoot, unjiggle, and you know exactly where they are, so your crosshair placement can be right on their head before you even peeking out, allowing you to trade damage in a really favorable way where they can't trade damage back. In addition to that, if you're always playing around cover, if any divers want to push you, you could swap to your shotgun, see them as they come around the corner through the walls, and they're not going to see you, and boom, you just win that fight really, really easily. Shotgun does so much damn damage, and you being able to see through walls after you've seen them for a couple of seconds is just kind of a cheat code in these matchups. Now, Jeff, the freaking land shark. Know that you can spit out your teammates and enemies separately, and you want to spit them out in a very strategic way. So, like, a great example of this is to spit your teammates to safety back with their team, and then spit the enemy into your team. You don't want to spit your team into an enemy where they'll die. You don't want to spit 3 enemies into your team where there's maybe only 2 teammates or 1 teammate, and that person will die because the enemies are literally on top of them. So you can kind of pick and choose, making it so that that enemy is isolated and against more numbers, right? That's what you ideally want to do. Now, in general, though, I would say look to grab only 1 to 2 enemies and spit them into your team. Don't necessarily try to grab the entire enemy team, because if you grab like all of them, you can't really spit them anywhere that is going to allow you to create that huge numbers advantage. So yeah, try not to get too many people, just get a couple, and especially using this ultimate actually to shut down ults by the enemy, or even save your teammates from certain ults. Like a Scarlet Witch is coming in, she's going to ult, boom, you can eat your team, save them from that, pop them right out. Super strong as well. Now, Thor is an incredibly underrated hero that people want to have him face tank everything and just survive, but he's not like the other tanks where he can just tank damage and live. Thor occupies the off-tanking role. Think of it like a tank meets a DPS, where he's incredibly good at healing for his team. What this means is if a Hulk jumps in on his teammates, he can pin them right off. If a Black Panther is in his backline, he can get in between him and his snipers. He's not necessarily looking to contest objectives and be the front line, but he is trying to keep his team alive and healthy and keep enemy divers off them so that they can do their job easier, and he has the health and the resources to shut these people down. Now, Captain America, on the other hand, can frontline and kill things, but timing is key. Living is often the biggest priority for you, and if you play really passive, you can live very easily by holding up your shield, running away when you're out of resources and low. That being said, there are going to be some key moments where you can pivot into the backline, but you typically don't want to do it alone. You want to wait for people to be either super low from the rest of your team, or you have a dive or some mobility hero going in the backline too, and then you can go with them and add an additional pressure. Now, for Winter Soldier, positioning is vital because you're not going to have any good mobility. I want you to take note of diver positions and conserve your cooldowns to try to outplay dives. If you don't have your pin, you're going to lose to every single diver. But if you got it, you can consistently win 1v1s. That's your strength. I think Winter Soldier is a really strong 1v1 DPS, and I've been playing him a ton. Not only am I going to be streaming him in ranked today, or depending on when you see this, every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, but I also have a Winter Soldier guide coming on this channel very soon, so look out for that. Now, Psylocke's primary is going to regenerate your cooldowns, and her primary poke is actually hit scan. So if you want to double dash out, use your invis to get to the fight in a long walk, and then see enemies far away and start poking at them, you'll have your cooldowns back before you go for your flank play. Now, the interesting thing is their alternate fire, where you can actually stick this onto a wall, look at opponents, and then recall it, and it will bounce to the front wall and bounce through all the opponents. Maybe it's 1, maybe it's 3. This is how you're going to do a crazy amount of damage when you combine it with your other abilities. Now for Moon Knight, this character actually has a super strong combo. You're gonna onk an enemy, right click, and that's your alternate fire, and then into your primary fire. This is going to pull them in and deal damage, then it's gonna ricochet your alternate fire, and then it's gonna ricochet your primary fire. This thing deletes people. Like out of nowhere, they're not looking at you, they're not expecting it. If you hit all of this, which is comically easy because you just have to hit the middle of the onk, so basically if you hit the onk, you guarantee hit the combo, you're just gonna do 200 plus damage out of nowhere. A little bit of follow-up, if anything at all, and that person is dead. That's why Moon Knight can just be a freaking scary menace. Super, super important to not only do on Moon Knight, but also be careful of if you're up against one. Now for Hawkeye, he can one-shot, but after 30 meters, you're not going to be able to charge up your primary to get that one-shot from range. But what you can do is use tanks or closer enemies to charge up that primary, and then quickly shoot at the enemy backline. This allows you to one-shot squishies without being in that range, and is super strong. Now, something also other people might not know is that you can perfectly time your melee to counter enemy fire. It's not going to reflect it, but it is going to deflect it away. And I think this is actually best used defensively when you're trying to back out of a fight, walking backwards, using it to deflect shots as you're leaving the fight. Now, when we talked about Thor, we talked about him being an off-tank, or like a tank DPS hybrid, so to speak. Wolverine is similar, but on the other end. This character is damn tanky and can actually occupy space without dying very easily. But what enables it is actually his passive regenerative healing factor. And what this does is it's a cooldown that is 90 seconds. It's really, really long. And it's when you have this off a cooldown, when you have this available, and you potentially die or go under zero, you're going to get 150 to 300 health depending on how much rage you have. If you have max rage, you'll get that full 300. This is why a Wolverine that goes in, they go and you kill them, boom, they're back up to full. They're really, really strong again. Now, this means that for that first engagement, you can go all in, and there are certain engagements that you can go really aggressive, but realize that after this triggers, now you're gonna have a really long cooldown, and the only way to get that cooldown gone is by assisting in KOs, but that doesn't mean you can go in really aggressive anymore because you're basically gonna be down 300 HP, so you need to find ways to contribute to fights without being that frontliner. So these moments where you have regenerative healing factor, you can be that frontliner tank in those moments, that dive tank. But when you don't, you need to be more passive, more reserved, trying to contribute, but not trying to be the front runner. Now for Black Widow, well, she definitely wants to stand somewhere, peek enemies, and shoot at them. You don't want to keep fighting from the same angle over and over again. I would say that especially if you stand in the same spot, enemies are going to be making a play to get to you from the second you start firing. Fire a couple of shots and then reposition. Not only reposition, but look down the lanes and the angles that enemies would kind of come down to get to you, because ideally you want to catch people off guard as Black Widow when someone is like in transition to get to you, so that you have a chance to get that first big shot and then maybe outplay them. Now for Ironfist, all he wants to do is set up an individual engagement. While fighting multiple people is super easy with your ultimate, you typically want to use your terrain and try to find an angle or an area where you can create a 1v1 fight. You have the mobility to chase people down. You have basically all the tools you need to block abilities and basically chase down somebody. They can't get away. But you don't want to fight 3 different people all at once unless you got that ultimate. So find strategic ways in which you can force these 1v1s and really try to run around the map and clear off the off angles. That's where all the long distance DPS will be occupying, whether it's a Hanzo, a Black Widow, a Punisher. These are the characters that you can close in the gap on, and they'll be a little bit isolated and you can fight them. Now for Squirrel Girl, you can bounce her abilities off of all the walls intentionally, and it's not even that hard to hit. You can literally bounce her alternate fire, you can bounce her primary, and this means that down corridors, you can intentionally do this to clear the entire area or just output a lot of damage. But that being said, the biggest mistake I'll give you on Squirrel Girl is to not jump in front of projectiles or hit scan players. Use it intentionally, but a lot of players just want to spam this, and when you're up in the middle of the air, you're a sitting target because you go up, you float there, and it's like playing goddamn aim labs. Don't do this. Now, the last tip was something I didn't even know, and I found out recently. You can bounce your heals off of the wall for Cloak and Dagger. That's freaking nuts. You can bounce it, and it's really easy to do, and it actually also still auto tracks onto them, so It's super easy to pull off, and if your teammates are around the corner or they're down a corridor, you can heal them without even being able to see them, which is pretty freaking cool. In addition to that, I really do think that how you use your ability that denies you and your team from getting seen or hit is really important. If you can track an enemy ultimate or a certain ability to use that for, you need to be thinking about those things. This is one of the reasons why Cloak and Dagger has such a high skill ceiling, because the more you think about the game, the more you're prepared to outplay certain things, the better and better you'll be at this character, and the more you can carry. Now, this is one tip to get started. People in this community have been grinding some of their favorite characters for a while, so if you have a tip that you want to share with everyone else about your mains, let us know in the comments down below so we can all get better together. But please smash that subscribe button. I'm pretty close to 100,000 subscribers, and I would love to get that with freaking Marvel Rivals. I love this game, guys, and I'm really happy that y'all are here. Thank you so much. I'm going to cut it off here so I can go freaking play some Marvel Rivals, and I'll see you next time.